Hello and welcome to a weekend edition of Relics of Orr. I am your host Erik, aka Shongaku, and this week we have a special guest host that we have brought on board, who is all the way from England, I do believe. Lewis from GuildWars2Hub.com. How are you doing, Lewis?
I'm very well, thank you.
How's the weather over the pond?
Freezing and constantly raining, which is nothing new for the UK.
Winter UK. Nice. All right.
Opens with "How's the weather?"
I do. That's like it's an easy sort of icebreaker.
The natural opener.
It's the natural opener. Everyone does that.
Then we'll go into a transition into
Malchior because he started talking. How are you doing, Malchior?
I'm doing good. Weather here kind of went crazy. It literally, everyone knows about the big snowstorm that happened through the southeast. It was like, I'm not gonna lie, it was 27 degrees Fahrenheit one day, and then when the storm was over, it was 77 degrees Fahrenheit the next day.
That is just weird. Georgia was an odd place to be.
Welcome to the southeast.
Somewhere where they have reasonable winters. How are you, Greibach?
Oh, I'm good. It's actually been, we had 2 days of a ton of rain, which is pretty normal, but it's actually been pretty sunny and moderate temperature here, so no freezing. Probably about, I don't know, 50 Fahrenheit, which is what, 10 Celsius?
I wasn't gonna try conversion.
For reference, Malchior's was about -1 up to 20 within a day.
Nice. Well, so we're here though to talk about Guild Wars 2, and since we're on a timeline, we're gonna jump right into it. But first, we're gonna interrogate Lewis. So,
cheers, guys.
So, Lewis, why don't you tell everyone about sort of who you are in the Guild Wars 2 community, what you're up to?
I guess I was the editor for Guild Wars 2 Hub, and I've been for about a year. Previously, covered Guild Wars 2 for Tap repeatedly before I joined Tent on Hammer. I've been pretty much blogging and challenging ArenaNet ever since.
So
we have a lot of that on this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. We're totally cool with
grumbly.
Being real.
Being
real.
sassy.
That's right.
Being real.
So, what do you like doing in Guild Wars 2? Or what sort of first, what drew you to Guild Wars 2 initially?
Well, I've played MMOs for a long, long time, since Ultima Online, and I think Guild Wars 2 was on my radar because it was marketed as doing something new, and dynamic events was something that really appealed to me, although I can happily have a moan about them later. And just the fact that because I've played MMOs for so long, they really ticked off loads of things that pissed me off about the genre. So, we talked about Aeon earlier, but when I last played Aeon, I was constantly annoyed at having to request someone for a group, and ArenaNet pretty much promised to change that, and that's what they did. And I think that's the main draw, that they intended to plug the gaps between what was poor in the genre to actually attempt to do something different to make a difference.
Did you play Guild Wars 1?
Yes, a lot. My main in Guild Wars 1 is a Mesmer, but I'd also got a very good Ranger as well. Unfortunately, not up to a full 50 points. I think I was about 38 or 40, something like that, when it came to Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, I think I'm sitting at about 38 points as well. It's like, do you want to go for God walking amongst mere mortals, or what do you want to?
Yeah, I was pretty late to Guild Wars 1 though, I must admit. I played Guild Wars 1 when it was maybe a year away from Guild Wars 2, maybe a bit more.
Wow, you went fast.
Yeah, it was really off my radar, and because I'd played like World of Warcraft and Neocron and everything in between, it was at first glance quite backwards in terms of movement and various things, but in some respects I wish we were still back playing Guild Wars 1, or at least had some of Guild Wars 1 systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, they did a lot of really different things compared to the rest of the genre, and I feel like some of them got caught in the crossfire of trying to make Guild Wars 2. But anyway, what were you saying, Malchior?
Multi-professional.
I'm gonna throw one more question at Lewis, because your blogs, like you and Ravius from Kilton Rats, are probably the most memorable blogs I remember during the pre-release days. And then all of a sudden, you get picked up by 10 Ton Hammer. How exactly did that work?
I mean, I think my biggest things before joining Guild Wars 2 obviously came from Tap repeatedly, and that all came about from me. I stalked Daniel Dosio and found his website, got his email, dropped him an email, just said, I like your artwork, do you want to have a chat? And he said yes straight away within like a couple of hours. Set that up, ended up being a massive interview, which pretty much, well, I think got me on good terms with ArenaNet, and I suppose allowed me to keep asking for more and more interviews, whether it was through Tap, and then eventually with 10 Ton Hammer and Guild Wars 2. So it definitely pays to ask. And then they needed a writer. I applied just like anyone else, sat an interview just like anyone else, and was fortunate enough to get the job.
That's cool. Yeah, I remember that interview you did with Daniel. That was like a 3 or 4 parter. It was one of the most like informational interviews we had at the time, because you didn't just praise the art design like we all do. You also asked him very specific questions like, how did you get started? What impact have you made on the game? Where do you come from in regards to your past experiences? It was great to see that you weren't afraid to ask the hard-hitting questions, and you still aren't. And that's why I feel you're looked up to so highly within the community.
Yeah, I mean, the interview I did with Daniel was probably one of my favourites I've ever done, because it was one of my big first ones within the industry, and he's just such a really nice bloke, and you know, you don't even have to bullshit when someone's artwork's that good. You literally can, you know, dribble over it all day long. So yeah, he was really open. He had loads of time. It was just him and me, just on a call, just chatting away really. And that's not to say I've not had that from ArenaNet in the past or recently, because most of ArenaNet are really accommodating. But yeah, I think that'll always stick out as top of my CV, to be honest, because he just was so open-minded and so willing to ask questions. Admittedly, I went into it absolutely to the teeth with his history, and I think I must have trolled his entire family history for about a month beforehand. But yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable, and we thank you for your work both then and now.
Yeah. So continuing on with a few questions in Guild Wars 2 right now, what are you generally focusing on with Guild Wars 2?
That's a difficult question to answer, because I think much of the game has fallen foul to my misery. So small scale skirmishes is what I like, but because I've invested all my money and time and 2 legendaries into my ranger, I must have been mad at the time. I've got an uphill struggle every single day. So small scale skirmishes, World v World, PvP, and when I've got time, I still actually like to track back and level up some alts. I think that's one of my favourite things, is just the leveling experience in any MMO. I think I'm 1 level away on my Ellie. and about 10 levels away I'm the Necromancer, so I think that'll be my 6th or 7th 80.
Nice.
Pretty sweet.
Congratulations. You're working your way towards a full stable of alts.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an item snob though, so that puts me about a bit, because if I don't look good and don't have the right gear, I don't play the character. So I tend to get everything prepared and lined up on my best and then just transfer it over when I'm ready. I mean, I tend to buy tier 3 for level 1 and then just transmute it all the way to 80.
That is
Nice.
costly, my friends.
Yeah, it's super costly, but looking poor's not my effort.
You don't like the clown
that's fair.
suit technique?
Oh, please.
It's like, and here's something that I found, and here's another thing that I found. I don't know if that match.
No.
And
It's like
you
the
dye 'em
rainbow
all-
wyvern
and then
armor
You dye
from-
them all different colors. We have a guy on our server. His name's Traumatic. I don't know if he watches the show or not, but he's made an icon on the NSP server because he wears the ugliest armor ever. He dyes it every which color possible.
What is the ugliest armor ever?
Looking pro.
Like, what, heck if I know.
It's probably a mismatch. Like,
Yeah, it's a complete mismatch.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, this one shall go.
Speaking of clowns, did you guys see that picture of Ronald McDonald?
I did. That was terrifying.
Oh, God. No,
I
stop.
hear he mails you burgers.
He does.
If you
No. If you're in the zone and he like feels like it. So for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, there is a person who basically made their character look like Ronald McDonald in the game, and he goes around with a balloon from the Queen's Jubilee, and he basically walks through a zone with the RP walk, and he will click on people and just randomly mail them burgers and fries. So keep an eye out for him.
So good.
amazing.
I almost hope he's a bot just because it's like, should you really spend your life doing that? I don't know.
He's probably like multi-boxing or something.
Yes, he's got that. He's like running
This guy-
top tier fractals with one hand, and the other hand is running Ronald
He's
McDonald.
got it on his second monitor. Just set it to auto walk.
He's probably one of those that profited from the original Mystic Forge books and has probably got about 40,000 gold and 1,500 legendaries. Got nothing else to do.
Right.
One of the people that was like, I turned all of my gold at the beginning of the game into gems, and then converted it back when it quintupled
my
in price.
God.
More, yeah. It's I actually one of my friends. He just spent all of his gems in the or all of his gold in the first couple months on gems, and he basically didn't even play that hardcore, but he ended up with like 5,000 gems or something like that, and he could have kept going. And I mean that's and that was not very much gold back then. But we can talk about gold and earning it through the course of the game later on.
Yes. So you recently wrote a story on Persistent World, and this is something you've talked about actually several times, I believe, is sort of the living story, Lewis, as a general concept, and your feelings on it. And you actually said that you thought that it would be better to end the living story and move to a more traditional sort of format. Can you sort of summarize your thoughts on that? I might be wrong.
You're right. I mean, that editorial came about. I hadn't written anything on Guild Wars 2 for a while, and it just popped into my head the fact that I did the interview with Mike, and I asked him at the time why are ArenaNet placing so much pressure on themselves to push out content so quickly when no one in the community or player base is necessarily saying, give me a patch every 2 weeks. And I never got a straight answer, and it just popped into my head the fact that I never got a straight answer. And I like the concept of Living World, but I dislike the delivery, and I think it's very flawed, very rushed, buggy, unnecessary, time-intensive, expensive, and when no one's specifically asking for it, the question is, why do it? If it's not a PR exercise, and if it can be completed in a couple of hours, sometimes as little as 30 minutes, you've been able to complete living world content. Why is it still in its current form? And I think if we change it, keep the name by all means, and keep the concept of changing the world, but deliver it in bigger segments less frequently, not only is it going to give more time to keep everything patched up and balanced and working properly, but it's also going to allow for the living world content to be bigger and better than what it currently is in these sort of bite-sized disposable chunks. And really, it was just a moan from me, the fact that I disagree with what they're doing, and I think that I do genuinely believe it isn't sustainable. Yes, it's earning money now, but then again, Elder Scrolls isn't released, Wildstar isn't released, Blade and Soul isn't released, and when people get itchy feet, obviously the amount of players decline and the income declines, and that's when cutbacks have to be made in staffing and output, and then the only question is what's left in terms of longevity when the living world story does in fact begin to buckle. So it was a bit of a moan, but I think one that's got substance.
I think it's a really interesting tightrope walk that they're kind of walking, because one of the things that we've kind of talked about a few times on the show is that companies have to create a way to maintain player engagement, and especially in one where there's not a subscription. Like, having a subscription is one way to keep player engagement because it creates that pressure to keep playing because you're paying for it. But in non-subscription games, they want you to keep playing because the more you play, the more likely you are to spend money on cosmetics and things like that. And if you walk away from it, it takes a lot to bring people back. And it really is a tightrope walk, because if they, as you're sort of implying here, if the content patches are relatively small from a player perspective every given 2 weeks, and so if they leave because they jump ship to Wildstar, or they jump ship to Blade and Soul, or they jump ship to EQ Next down the road, or whatever, then these 2 week patches aren't really going to entice them to come back necessarily, because they're so small in nature, and also because they're temporary. But the other side of the balancing act, I feel like, is that if they don't release them frequently, then there is a greater risk of players losing engagement in between the releases anyway. And if the larger releases aren't large enough, then that may also not bring people back. So if they start losing retention before other games have even come out because it's too long between content patches, then that's going to be really bad when other games do come out that draw their interest. So it's definitely, I don't really know what the right answer is, and I feel like ArenaNet doesn't know what the right answer is either. But I definitely can see why it's a struggle.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right in some respects, but I think it boils down to longevity and player perception, and it is without question that prior to Living World, Guild Wars 2 already had more content and more things to do than many MMOs on the market that have been out there years. You know, you've got World v World, structured PvP that you can play all day long and just roll out an ult and be max geared straight away. The PvE itself was massive, all the dungeons, crafting, it was absolutely packed with stuff. And the fact that Living Worlds come along and added even more on top, not only is it intimidating to alts and new players, but they've not actually added any legs for true long term, because people stuck with Guild Wars because the PvE side was decent, but Guild versus Guild was where the longevity was at, and it didn't matter if you were on your 10th ult, there was always time for it, and it was so prominent. And I don't think Guild Wars 2 has anything of that nature. I mean, even World v World is so disposable because there's no reward for winning. There's no true outcome.
Well, and it's so large that you don't feel like you necessarily contribute to winning or losing.
Yeah,
there's no impact. It's all coverage.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest issue with Guild Wars 2 is the fact that for all its depth, it feels very, very shallow, and that it's appealing to.
It's more that it has breadth
something
than depth.
immediate. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I'll maybe disagree with you a little bit on Guild Wars 1, at least past prophecies, because I know a lot of people that are not interested in PvP at all. And the GVG community was like huge and thriving, but I think the number of sales they had were actually, there were a large portion of PvP players that kept playing the PvE. However, I do think that it would behoove them to bring those types of GVG systems into Guild Wars 2. Like, you're definitely not wrong on that aspect, but I know that personally myself and just about everybody I know in real life played multiple thousands of hours of Guild Wars 2 and barely touched PvP. Guild Wars 1. And barely touched PvP for a variety of reasons, but they really did come out with a lot of really good PvE content that was fun to replay. But again, I feel like I get a little bit saddened for the people who liked, one or the other that doesn't get brought forward. Because there's a lot of people in the community that are really disappointed with the state of PvP and the lack of GVG and a lot of those things. And I really feel like a lot of the PvP stuff was more of an afterthought in Guild Wars 2's development, which surprised a lot of people, for sure.
Now, to go back on the Living World story bit, I kind of had a disconnect moment. The element that people bring up all the time with Living Story is, it needs to introduce new professions, new races, new classes, new maps, whatever, things that...
Alright, welcome back. We had some technical difficulties, but Malchior was in the middle of a sentence, so we are going to let him finish his discussion on how he feels about Living World content. So Malchior, continue with your thought, if you remember where you were.
Alright, I'll fire this real quick to Lewis. People talk about zones, maps, new weapons, professions, things that would add to the game, not change existing elements. What would you introduce to, like, the Living Story time frame? If it was adapted or if it was removed, what would come first in regards to those elements? Like, what kind of time frame are you looking at?
I think one Living World update a quarter is a reasonable expectation of content. I mean, I think I genuinely think it comes down to when do players get to the point where they demanded content every 2 weeks. I just find it unbelievable that we're even entertaining that idea that we can expect studios to produce content that's scripted, acted, written and voiced, and designed and developed within 2 weeks. It's bonkers. And that's the reason why it's scrappy and sloppy in places. And I think one update a quarter is more than adequate if between that Living World update there are other patches. I think that's fair.
I'd be inclined to agree with you. I'll take it real quick back to something Gray touched upon. No one, as far as I'm aware, someone may have, but the grand majority of the population never asked for 2-week content. Like, seriously. The monthly stuff was good for the time we had it. And then ArenaNet's like, in the style that is ArenaNet, in what they are as a company, one of their number one creeds is innovation. Try something new. So it's like, hey, we can pump this monthly stuff out pretty fast. Why don't we try 2 weeks? And like the first 2 week stuff we got was some of the opening South Sun Cove stuff. Not like November, but when it came back in May. And everyone will argue that was completely horrible. It really was, because there wasn't much substance to it. People already hated South Sun Cove.
It actually kind of broke the zone.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah. But that was kind of their first step. That was their stumbling block. It's like, we can kind of do this. And so they've been improving slowly over time. But as we've all said, it's changing the game world. It's not adding new systems or new features, things that would traditionally draw people back.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to draw people back. They just have to keep the people who
Yeah.
they have to get new people, and they have to keep the current player base that spends money on the gym store active. That's truly why I believe they're keeping on the 2-week route for now. I'm
Speaking
inclined
of-
to see-
speaking of
longer
the-
part,
We're gonna actually move it forward really quick. Good thoughts, but we have like 20 minutes left, so I'm gonna be moving us forward. Sorry, Greibach. They did recently with the current event, with the current living story, which is we're getting back on that 2-week pace after about 6 weeks off for Christmas, or holidays, whichever you would prefer. And they recently released some massive world bosses, which I have to say personally seem to me to be some of the more interesting fights that we've seen in the game. But it definitely has caused a lot of polarizing opinions. Lewis, what do you think about the new world bosses? Feel free to disagree with me.
Yeah, I think they're alright. They're still a bit of a clusterfuck, though, aren't they, really? Too many people. Actually, I take that back in some respects, because Tequatl is decent. I still don't think it's in the realms of an instance and scripting, but I think it's the best we're going to get in terms of tactics and player coordination and the pacing. I mean, it still runs like a dog's dinner, even on a decent PC, and it's still a bit of a face roll on the keyboard, but at least there's a little bit of a framework there to tie people through. I think it's pretty hard to fail at it once your server's actually cracked it, but I suppose that stands for any raid sort of setup anyway. I think I'd just like to see things like the Dragons instanced and brought down to a 10-man group, as opposed to hundreds just spamming a zone.
Yeah, to go on that, if I had to rate them right now, the big world, not all the world bosses, but the ones that are like raid-like encounters, I'd rate them top to bottom, Marionette, and then hard decision, Tequatl, and then the Worm. Because the Marionette, it's taken the map and it's divided it into the 5 lanes, and then after that, it divides it again into the 5 platforms. There's much more individual impact from one player. The stories you can see on the forums where my team was down, but I managed to finish the champion solo and kill the regulator. I am the hero of the day. There are countless stories of those. That's what drives players to improve their skill. I truly think the Marionette, despite the complaints that have been thrown around, it has increased the overall player skill in the game.
I also
think that
really
couldn't
like
be replicated though in an instance.
I
This
think it
one's
easily could be replicated in an instance.
it
I
could
just think that-
very easily be replicated in an instance. It would not get the same. I don't say quality. It won't get the same impact. It won't get the same flavor.
It would feel very different if it was instance. With instancing, the advantage is you have a group of friends, and I think you could actually make things more along the lines of like the Tequatl Worm fights, where they're much more difficult, but they're geared towards, okay, you have this group of people that are organizing. There's this, and I think this is something they're trying to figure out, is trying to drive server organization, which can be a bit weird at times.
Well,
Yeah.
especially with overflows. But
Yeah.
I've seen a really big sort of contradiction in their philosophy on some of these newer ones, because they've said repeatedly in the forums that especially the Worm is designed not for the casual players but for the elite players. But that's completely contradictory to having completely open world, unorganized PvE against it, because you don't need to be an elite player to go to an open world event. You just need to have a waypoint. And for every
And be there 2 hours early.
Well, sure. But for every non-elite player that's there, it makes it much harder for the elite players, and it basically takes away your elite skill ability if players are ruining the event for you that are just there. And that's both and again, that's where I feel like instancing would be a lot better for that, but they don't want to do that because they want everybody involved. But everybody isn't elite.
So
You can't say that you want everybody involved in an event and then you also want the event for only the elite players. That doesn't; those two things don't mesh.
So, Lewis, do you feel, though, that they're moving in a direction... So, the previous world bosses were pretty much you just stand in a spot and hit one, and it dies. Do you feel, Lewis, that this is an improvement, or do you think that they should go a different direction with world bosses entirely?
I think inevitably anything that builds upon what they first delivered when the game launched is an improvement, and the recent ones that they've delivered are an improvement, but I don't think they provide the same feeling that you got when you completed a raid in the likes of World of Warcraft. I mean, you know, a 40-man raid where 40 of your friends work together in a coordinated fashion with planning, timing, to overcome pretty bloody hard bosses was immeasurable, really, in terms of enjoyment. And you lose some of that when pugs are involved because they either piss you off or they do something stupid, or you know they're AFK, or the loot's crap because it's got to be shared amongst hundreds of people opposed to 40. And I think I would rather still see something instanced and raid-like, and bring it back in towards sort of dungeon type of atmosphere. And make the external content that's out in the game world casual, but keep the raid stuff for the serious guilds. But off topic a little bit, I don't even think ArenaNet know what they're doing with these sort of big bosses anyway. I think they're sort of blindly searching in the dark for something that actually sticks.
Well, I see them building interesting encounters and mechanics. They don't know how they want to deliver them yet.
Yeah, I think they're doing a lot of. I think sort of the theme of this whole past year has been trying to chart new territory, and with that's gonna come some smashing successes like the Bazaar and some missteps and crashes.
Yeah. On the note of the... Go ahead, Lewis.
Well, I was going to say, the thing is, it's hard to tell, and, you know, not to name drop or anything, because it's hard to tell who's made what. So, because there's different Living World teams and they're all assigned to different things, it would be nice to know what team made what, because realistically they're the ones that you want to say, well, you did a bloody awesome job, keep doing what you're doing. But it also needs to be known how long those Living World teams had and what they were making. So like the Bazaar, for example, I think is one of the best that they've done, if not the best, and I'm sure that was in the making much longer than the various other awful ones that we've experienced.
I do know for a fact that Crystal Reed, whichever Living World team she's in, she designed Tequaddle and Marionette and Worm. She comes from a raid like WoW background. She's done like MC40 and stuff, because I've actually talked to her on Twitter, and like she'll say like, I'm the one who created this content, I'm so proud of it, give me your feedback. She's real open. So I asked a little bit about her background and how she's trying to instill these raid mechanics into open world stuff. And
well, maybe I should definitely
they're looking to raise the bar. I mean, we talked about that in a previous show. Josh Forum saying we want to put that feeling of suspense into players' minds, because some people can't feel like they're having fun unless they're being challenged.
Unless there's danger.
The idea is putting that in the open world amongst the other people who don't want to be challenged. That's a problem.
It's hard. Yeah, it's fundamentally contradictory in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
And
But they're trying to raise their own bar to catch up with the rest of the industry's raids, though. Effectively, Blizzard have set the bar the highest for raid content. ArenaNet are nowhere close to that, so they're trying to raise their own bar to catch up.
yeah,
They're trying to make their own bar.
Yeah.
Like where Blizzard has, let's say Blizzard's the high jump. You really
they're
gotta
trying to be the long jump.
you gotta go up the gear grind or something, and then get everyone together with the max coordination to beat a raid, or at least you used to before Mists of Pandaria. And let's say ArenaNet is the long jump. They're reaching for something people have never seen before, like this open 150 player content spread out over an entire sector of the zone.
Encourage,
that
gates.
is the Marionette. AQ was pretty cool.
I honestly think that if ArenaNet wanted to make a raid like in a classical WoW raid, I think they are more than competent enough to do it. But it's because, and this is something I like to talk about a lot, it's a ramification of the design decisions that they have decided to stick with of not having large instance content. And so if you put that restriction, on Blizzard, I doubt that Blizzard would be able to fundamentally create better content necessarily than Guild Wars 2 has in the same period of time. I just think that Blizzard made different design decisions, and that's led them to have, like you said, they're fundamentally different. But I don't doubt that ArenaNet could make the high jump if that's what they wanted to do, but they're not aiming for it.
So Lewis, one last question then, and then we'll move on to the next topic. What do you think is a good size for Guild Wars 2 instance content if they were going to go for raids? What size would you think would be optimal?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because it does come back to the systems that ArenaNet have designed. And as an advocate, originally what gravitated me towards Guild Wars 2 was the fact that it did away with the Trinity. And having returned to things like WoW and WildStar and even Tesso to some degree, I miss the structure behind some sort of Trinity. And I think ArenaNet have gone too far to the degree of self-sustainability to the point where anything above 5-man is just too much because we already have a problem with Berserker items anyway, and the fact that face rolling and maximum damage is the undoing to all content within Guild Wars 2. And I think unless ArenaNet make huge changes to the way in which the game functions, or at least significantly nerf Berserker builds, which I hear is their intention anyway, anything above 5-man is just going to be a bit of a loss, really. 10-man, I think, could be manageable, but I still think it'll all just descend into a bit of a face scrum of DPS. But I think that's an inherent flaw with the product as opposed to something that ArenaNet can truly fight against.
If they were to do it, I think they would have to do similar to the Marionette, where even though it's a 20-man raid, it would require you to split into groups of 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that could totally work. But
Deep
anyway,
style.
I won't say any more. Yeah, yes, exactly. Just like in the elite areas in Guild Wars 1. But we've talked about this a lot.
I got one more question to present to you guys, because we kind of talked about the problems now, or rather the issues that ArenaNet hasn't solved. Lewis kind of gave his spill on what he would do. He wants to change the design or something, nerf Zerkers, which is being done to an extent. What would you do to fix this, or change it in such a way where the hardcores can have their content and the casuals can have their content? Would you want to mix them up in this open world kind of style? I'll go ahead and give my piece first, and then you guys can go.
All right, now
they're close. They're really close. I feel Marionette was absolutely fantastic. It needs to stay in the format that it is. It just needs to give players more tools to group up and to show who's doing where and what and blah. Worm is even though it has interesting mechanics like getting eaten and whatever, it's all a DPS check because that last 2-minute timer, oh my gosh, if you don't get the sync kill, that's it. It's over. Sorry if you got 5 people who can't do max DPS and are dead or whatever.
So
I really feel there used to be 2 options. Like, the events run on their hourly timer, or we spread it out further, every 2 hours, every 4 hours, whatever, for anyone to join in. But also, it's turned into a new guild mission type that a guild can talk to an NPC and trigger the encounter. You will know that, all right, we got all of our best people here in the zone right now, let's do this. And everyone that's in the zone at the time will also know, oh, hey, Super Awesome Guild is here. They lead our server. We should stick in this zone for a bit and try and help out.
And the interesting thing there you could also do, theoretically, is tie all of the core mechanics to the guild itself that starts it off. So the guild gets there. So, for example, the hammers, which have been repeatedly stolen on our server for a while, so that we ran out of them. You could tie the hammers to the actual guild itself, so that only that guild can pull, or only that guild can access the turrets, and that way you don't have as much trolling. Now, everyone else can help the guild by doing DPS and running around and maybe helping with other things, but those core support mechanics that Arena has added in, if you tied it to a guild trigger, that would allow you to control the griefing, which I think would make the events much more straightforward. Now, so it sounds like we have sort of 2 schools of thought. Is we have the instance thought and the open world. And Lewis, you're definitely on the instance camp.
Without question.
Cool. Greibach, really quick, instanced or open world?
Both. Different designs for different things. I like what Malchior said. I think that's a great idea for some of these things, but I also agree with Lewis that I feel that the really, really hardcore people are looking for something more structured that you can't overcome with just a lot of people. And I think the instance is really the only way to accommodate that without completely hosing casual players.
Yeah,
Cool.
If the worm wasn't large enough that it encompassed 3 different spots of a zone, I'd have put it in an instance and repeat.
You could still do that in an instance. But, so, cool. That is, we're pretty much out of time right now, but I have, one more question for Lewis. Lewis, favorite race and favorite class in Guild Wars 2? Or profession, profession. We don't have classes. It does not have to be a playable race, by the way.
No.
Tengu, straight away. I'm hoping one day we can actually respec for our races, and I'll change all of mine to Tengu. And then class, I'd still say Ranger, but I would reminisce for the Guild Wars 1 version.
Amen to that. D-shot for the win.
And you also you ran Necrobator for a while, didn't you?
My editor-in-chief did.
Oh, okay. So you went and absconded with him. Nice.
Oh, Necrobator.
I was wondering about that. I love that place. That was an amazing site. It was the site that confirmed Flesh Golem, so I will always love it. Cool. All right.
I want to rip off one question from Chronicles of Tyria.
Do it, Greibach. Do it.
What is your favorite video game of all time, Lewis?
Oh.
It's such a mean question.
It's terrible.
No prep.
Making me sweat now. I think Neocron. I think a very, very niche MMO that did lots and lots of amazing things. Totally underrated. Peaked with around 4,000 or 5,000 users, but was really competitive, some amazing mechanics, better mix of third person and first person than the likes of the Elder Scrolls Online, and an outpost system that puts many games PvP to shame. So check out some more bits of it, just because it was amazing.
And what was that? What was that place? What was that game again?
Neocron.
Neocron.
It was by a studio called Reactor. they just had an amazing outpost system where clans could own the entire world map and they'd earn money from the outposts that were there.
Nice.
PvP was third person or first. You could loot people's items when they dropped. They had vehicles, and they had hacking and stealth, and it was just ace. It was absolutely ace. And because the community was really small, you could actually be quite famous for your ability, which was super cool.
That's always cool.
Very neat. All right, well, thank you for being on the show this week, Lewis. We unfortunately didn't get to everything, but hey, that's what happens when your internet crashes halfway through. But thank you for being on. And is there any other websites beyond Guild Wars 2 Hub that you would like to where your work can be seen?
Not besides Tenton Hammer main page and EQ Hammer, which is the EverQuest Next coverage. You can still see my work on tap repeatedly as well every now and again, and I would recommend you check out that site because it's amazing.
It is a pretty cool site. There are some great articles there.
I'm gonna have to go back to tap.
All right.
It's super good.
Well,
I hope you're going to invite me back anyway.
It's true. We will bring you back at
we'll
some
have a
point.
3-hour session on notes.
Yes, we didn't get to the economy. Oh my goodness, we need to do an economy cast apparently. I will just be a fly on the wall for that one and listen to you guys go to town because I'm terrible at economy. Yes, Greibach, you will be
in itself.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to take the stream down because we do have to let Persistent World either sleep or actually you have a interview thing happening, I think, at some point. So
I've got an Elder Scrolls thing now. It's bedtime.
Oh, all right. Well, good luck. And what you can follow us at relicsoforr.com. I am at Shongaku or at Relics of Orr. And you also have at King Street Greibach and at Malchior Devon, which is short for Malchior Devon Home. So thank you guys for watching, and we hope you have a good week, and we will see you in game. Guild missions this evening at 30 minutes after reset. Side note. All right. Bye, guys.
Cheers.
See ya.